Hey everyone, welcome. Excited to have you with us tonight. We have Jeff with us here, who's going to be telling us all about pitching online and getting signed. And I'm actually just going to pass it off and hop on out. But Jeff, thank you so much for joining us and running through this.
Great. Thank you, Matthew, and welcome everybody. I'm excited to walk through today's presentation of pitching online in order to get your game signed. First, a little bit about me. I've signed a handful of games in the last year and a half with five different publishers. I can't talk about most of them yet because they aren't far enough along in the development process, but I can talk about Positano, which is coming out this spring. And also, I've been fortunate enough to have been a finalist in both Cardboard Edison and Ion Awards 2 years running for each, which is relevant because everything I'm going to teach you about pitching to publishers also helps you do well in contests. But that said, at this point and to date, I have almost zero name recognition with any publishers. So I have to rely solely on the strength of the prototypes that I'm designing and my pitches. So I'm probably just like most of you in that regard. And then also relevant is I have spent over a decade in product management in the tech industry, and I found a lot of those skills have transferred over well into board games, and particularly helpful with pitching. All right, so with that, what are we going to go over today? I have several questions I'm hoping to answer for you. Why should you be pitching online? What do publishers actually want? How are you going to hook them in? When do you pitch your game? Who do you pitch to? And then finally, assuming things are going well, what next? And the caveat is, I don't have all the answers. I'm just going to share with you what's worked for me, and hopefully some of this will work for you. So, first of all, let's just get definitions straight. What do I mean by pitching online? Generally, this involves contacting publishers via an email or a website form. Those are the most common ways to do it. We'll talk about a few alternatives to those. But let's start out with the Royal Rumble, the pitching online versus pitching at conventions. Because back in the day, people only pitched at conventions, and pitching online is somewhat newer. So I gravitated to pitching online, first of all, because it is way, way, way cheaper. You really don't have to spend anything to send some emails or submit some web forms, whereas going to conventions can cost a good deal of money. In addition to that, online, you can do it anytime. You don't have to wait for Gen Con or Origins or PAX U. You can do it at any time. And when you're doing so, you can reach more publishers. For any convention you're going to go to, it's not going to have every publisher in the world there. You'll be able to reach more of them, and hopefully some more of them that are better fit for your game. And you can also more easily reach international publishers, so you're not having to fly off to Essen, for example, to pitch to German or European publishers. That said, conventions do have some positives, some pros over pitching online. First of all, they're great for relationship building. You are going to sit down in a pitch meeting with an actual live human and hopefully make a connection there. So that's something that is easier to do when you are in the room with them. You also get an immediate initial response. As we'll talk about, a lot of times with pitching online, you don't get any sort of response from a lot of publishers. At least when you're in a pitch meeting, you'll get some kind of initial response. It's not typically anything firm, but you'll at least get a sense of are they into this game or not. Conventions are also good for pitching multiple games at once. I don't recommend sending out an email with 5 games attached to it. But when you go to a pitch meeting, it is reasonable to have a few games there, show sell sheets of each of them, talk about them briefly, and then see which ones the publisher is interested in. And then finally, you can oftentimes get pitch meetings for conventions without a pitch video. Certainly, pitch videos might help you get those pitch meetings, but you might be able to get those meetings without a pitch video, which can save you time. I don't recommend pitching online without a pitch video. You're going to need it. All right. So that said, the question is, if online pitching is so much cheaper and has other advantages, does it actually work? So I'm just going to share my raw results over the past 2 years. Online, I've done 53 different pitches for 10 different games, and 6 of them have been signed. At conventions, I've done 17 different pitches for 8 different games, and none of them have been signed so far. 4 of them are in progress, so we'll see if those turn into anything. So those are my results thus far. Basically, where I'm at is that online pitching works. And my current philosophy on conventions is it's not worth the money to travel just to pitch. If that's all you're going to do, you probably want to save your money and pitch online instead. I will, though, certainly set up pitch meetings at conventions if it's a local convention or if I'm going to be there for other reasons. It's great to pitch at conventions. I just find it doesn't make a lot of economic sense if you're just going to a convention to pitch. All right, so let's jump into what publishers actually want, and hopefully I can reveal some of that mystery. Publishers want bankable products. They are not cold-hearted mercenaries of the business world, but they are trying to run businesses. The board game industry is a tough one. Thousands of games come out every year. A lot of those have rather slim profit margins or negative profit. So when you're pitching a game, publishers are looking to see, is this prototype that you're showing me something that I think is a bankable product? That means, does it have low risk? What are the chances this is going to blow up in my face and not sell any copies at all? And then also, are there chances that this has high potential reward? The hits in the board game industry are outsized hits. There are a handful of hits every year that make those publishers quite a bit of money. And if a publisher can stumble into one of those, that can set them up for some years to come. But those are not all that common. So they're going to be looking at your game to see if that's a possibility. Next, they want to find games that are going to be easy for them to market. That means that it's a game that fits the same target audience as their existing games, that can be marketed through the same types of channels and sold through the same types of channels as their existing games. And then they're looking for games that increase the strength of their brand. And what I mean by that is they want to come out with games that, potential customers are going to look at and say, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense from that publisher. And I know that's going to be another one that I like. At the same time, though, they want to make sure it doesn't cannibalize existing products. So what you're looking to do is publishers are looking for games that the same target audience that they've been selling to they're going to want these new games, but that the game is different enough that that target audience can own all of that publisher's catalog of games, and this new one that you're pitching to them is not going to be redundant enough to any of those existing games that they wouldn't want to pitch, or that the customer wouldn't want to buy it. So your mission when you are pitching to publishers is to show them that your game is a bankable product for their target audience. And how do you do that? Well, you're going to hopefully employ what I like to call hook-first design. You've probably heard about hooks, but just this is how I think of them. A hook is a single sentence that is compelling. It's fresh. It's easy to understand. And it's going to make people say, ooh, or ooh. And there are different types of hooks. It can be a theme, or oftentimes it's just a cool name, a funny name, a punny name. It can be a component that grabs your attention, or it can be a mechanic. And one quick note on mechanics, because I think we as board game designers tend to over-index on mechanics for our hooks. And yes, you can certainly have mechanics that are hooks, but I'm going to say they are oftentimes more nuanced, more complex, less easy to understand than themes and component hooks. So it's not to say you shouldn't pursue them. You absolutely should. But know that theme and component hooks are easier to use to draw in an audience of publishers and eventually down the line, customers. So I'm going to share a couple examples of each of these hooks with a couple of my own prototypes. So first, Magma Punk. In Magma Punk, you're going to lead your guild of salamanders to construct lava-powered machines atop erupting volcanoes. Hopefully that is easy to understand, fresh, compelling, and makes you say, ooh, that sounds like something I would like to play. If indeed you are the target audience. And then this also features a mechanic of eruption farming, which I'm not going to go into here, but hopefully even just the name of it is like, oh, that sounds interesting. That's the type of reaction you're going for with a hook. Similarly, this is branching out. This one has a strong component hook. This is a big 3D bonsai tree that is constructed over the course of the game, and has the kind of table presence that people walk by and say, ooh, what is that? And then it has some fun mechanics, including cutting and grafting, in which you can grab a group of the pieces and move them to somewhere else on the tree, reattaching it and dramatically reshaping the tree. So these are some examples of thematic hooks, component hooks, and mechanic hooks. So what you need to do in order to pursue hook first design is, if you want to maximize your chances of getting signed, you need to have employ some discipline in the way you work on games that doesn't necessarily come natural. I think for myself and a lot of us, we just want to work on the thing that feels fun to us and jumps in our head. And that can sometimes work out. Sometimes, though, that thing that seems fun to you might not have any hooks, and oftentimes a lot of, for my own ideas, oftentimes they don't have any hooks. So if you want to maximize your chances of getting signed, if you want to pursue hook first design, you first need to prioritize your ideas based on the strength of their hooks. Take a look objectively at each idea, and you rank them by the strength of their thematic, component, and mechanical hooks. Then you need to have the discipline to not start on working on some new design without it having at least a hook. And again, this can be hard because sometimes something seems fun to you, but if you can't distill it down to one sentence that is fresh, compelling, and easy to understand and makes people say, ooh, you're not likely to find that through playtesting. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but usually the strongest hooks come with the initial idea. And then go ahead and seek early feedback on hooks. So in that first playtest, ask your fellow playtesters about the hooks. What did they think of as the hooks? Tell them what you think the hooks are, and ask them how strong that they think they are for a given target audience, for a given type of publisher, and try to solicit honest feedback on that. And as I said, most of my ideas don't have any hooks. They are in the incubation stage. I try to keep them in the incubation stage until they have a good hook. Sometimes I myself slip up and I start working on something and I realize there's nothing special about this. There's nothing that's grabbing people's attention. And so I usually then start working on something else. All right. So with that said, when is your prototype ready to pitch? So you've done a bunch of play testing. Hopefully this is a prototype that has at least one strong hook. I think of three things as needing to be true before I start pitching. And I'll say I tend to start pitching maybe a little bit earlier than some game designers. So first of all, I'm looking for enthusiastic feedback from playtesters that I see as the target audience. Examples of enthusiastic feedback. My favorite one is, I would buy this today if I could. When you hear that, you know that you're probably ready to pitch. Oftentimes in these situations, the playtesters are talking about the game in its published state. They're talking about what the publisher could do with components to make it that much more compelling. Secondly, then, you want to make sure the game is stable enough that the hooks won't change. That if you were to create a sell sheet or a video, as we'll talk about a bit later, that the content in that will be stable. So this doesn't mean you have to be 100% done working on the game. You can still be tweaking numbers, doing some balancing, coming up with a few more asymmetric powers, whatever it might be. But those hooks should be plenty stable by the point that you're ready to start pitching. Because honestly, as we'll talk about, you might have a few months before you get any kind of response or any kind of publisher that's looking to play test the game. So you could start getting out there and start pitching a little bit earlier than at the point where you were never going to make any changes to the game. And then finally, you're going to have an easier time with publishers if you have strong graphic design and you are creating hints of a final product. You want to be able to help publishers imagine what that game is going to look like when it's on store shelves. Does this mean it needs to be that polished? No, you don't need, you certainly shouldn't be paying for art for a prototype. You don't need it to be that polished, but you need to give the suggestion of what it could look like, help people with their imagination. And good, clean graphic design is going to help. And then, if you have ideas for what that should look like as a final product, try to mock that up with some cardboard or 3D printing or that sort of thing to help sell the idea of what this could look like in the end. All right. In addition to that, what else are you going to need? You're going to need three things. You need a written overview and or pitch emails. You need a sell sheet and you need a video. We're going to talk through each of those. First of all, the email. This is my template for a 5-sentence pitch email. And I basically use the same template every time, just changing the words depending on the game and the publisher. So I start with a one sentence intro that includes the primary hook. Then, if the game has any kind of awards, or if it already has some kind of social media following or anything notable like that, that might be worth stating next. Thirdly, then, the third sentence, why this game should be a good fit in their catalog. You should talk about their other games. You should talk about how this fits in with their target audience. You can talk about here if you can impress them further if you talk about, their sales channels. They sell on Kickstarter or through Amazon or local game stores, and why you think your game is going to be a good fit alongside those. You see the sentence here. This is a pretty minimal connection. You can go further. The more you personalize it, the more you're going to impress them. And then finally, the last one or two sentences is a very brief explanation of the game that goes a little bit deeper and includes additional hooks. So this 5-sentence email should be primarily hooks in it, and should get their attention. In addition to that text, not more than 5 sentences, you want to include a photo of the game in the body of the email and links to the sell sheet, or attach the sell sheet, and a link to a 2-minute video, which we'll talk about in just a moment. All right, that's the 5-sentence email. Next, how to make a killer sell sheet. You're going to start with 1 to 4 very large images with very brief callouts that hint at the gameplay. I've seen lots of sell sheets, and my most common feedback is the images are not large enough, and there's way too much text. I usually say to cut the text by about 70%. You don't need a lot of words to explain, to give hints at your game. You don't have to give a full rules explanation. This is simply communicating what the hooks are for the game. The target audience of the sell sheet should be obvious. You don't necessarily have to state it, but it should be obvious who you're going after. And then you want to format the sell sheet to match the game's vibe. So if you have, a dark themed area control game full of conflict, you probably want a dark themed, dark looking, sell sheet that's going to match that. And then finally include, your basic stats, your number of players, your duration, and, the minimum age. Which that one's probably even optional. Include basic components when you're providing, say, a list of the cards in the game. just say it's got 100 cards. You don't need to go through every type of card because you're really just trying to give the publisher a sense of how expensive is this game going to be to produce. And then finally, your name and email so they can contact you. All right, killer sell sheet. Next, a killer video. This has to be 2 minutes, maybe a little bit more, but certainly not up to 3 minutes. Keep it brief. If it's short, they're going to be more likely to look at it. So first of all, the video should be hooks. Lots of hooks. The video should be about hooks. I'm going to keep saying that. Secondly, never talk about the game without showing the game. I've seen videos that they're a 2-minute video and the designer spends 45 seconds doing an introduction before you see the game. That is burning precious time. Your game will sell itself a lot better with visuals than whatever it is you're saying. Think of the video as a commercial, not a tutorial. Think of the, if you imagine watching a commercial on YouTube, that's going to, you can imagine your game has been signed. There's going to be a commercial on YouTube that's promoting the Kickstarter. It's come into stores, whatever it might be. What is that commercial going to say? It's not going to be a rules tutorial. And then for each point about gameplay, you're going to talk about the player experiences. Don't provide a rule without saying why what it does in the game. Does it create a dramatic moment? Does it add tension? Is it hilarious? Why are you talking about that piece of gameplay? How does that affect the experiences of players? And then similar to the sell sheet, match the game's vibe with your visuals, your music, your sound effects. I like to add music or sound effects to videos. It does not take much effort at all, and it makes them stand out a little bit more. All right, with that said, everything on the left is mandatory. Do that. Everything on the right is highly flexible. Any of the following can work. You can show your physical game. You can show a virtual prototype like on Screen Top. You can use photos of the game. You can use videos of gameplay. You can use slides that are either illustrated or animated. You can film an actual gameplay with a group of people playing it, or you can do stage shots. Any and all of the following any and all of those can work. You can mix and match them in a single video. But the key thing is to do the stuff on the left. The content is much more important than how you choose to put it together. And I'll also say here, publishers are not expecting these to be super polished. If you can just show the game and show your hooks, you're in good shape. Just be yourself, show the game, show your hooks. Here's an example of how you cram in a good amount of content in 2 minutes. The first 10 seconds, you should be able to introduce yourself, give a one sentence intro to your game that includes its primary hook, and state the player count and duration. Then you're going to provide, for the next 10 seconds, before you jump into more details, if you have supporting hooks for your game beyond that primary hook, talk about those. Because somebody might not get past the first 20 seconds of your video. Then you can go into briefly, how do you win the game? Then you can spend the bulk of the time talking about gameplay, but when you're doing that, talk about player experiences. Talk about why each rule is in the game and what it does to create a fun experience for players. Then wrap it up with how the game ends and a brief thank you that maybe shows a title slide for the game. All right, so you have your email, you have your sell sheet, you have your video. It is pitching time. So with that, you got to first identify who you're going to pitch to. First, I'm going to take a look at the chat. I have the questions coming in. So, is it important to introduce yourself in a pitch video? As in, hi, I'm Eric Dittmer, designer of something, adulting. Yes, you should introduce yourself in a pitch video because you are pitching yourself as much as you're pitching your game. The publisher might pass on this particular game and end up signing your next game. So yes, absolutely. Don't go into your whole biography. Just introduce your name. I like to put myself on camera. I think that's good. If you're not comfortable with it, no big deal. but yeah, you're pitching yourself as much as your game, and that you would potentially need to be somebody that they'd want to work with, and so help make that clear. So yeah, very briefly introduce yourself. I definitely recommend it. All right. Oh, more questions. What if my game has 3 different ways to play with different win conditions? Pick the best one, show the best one. And then if you think it's really critical that if you think the hook of the game is that it has these different ways to play and different win conditions, then yeah, talk about that. If it's not the primary thing you're going to do to sell the game, you probably don't need to mention those. It's a short 2 minutes. All right, so I'm going to move on. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So identify the best fit publishers. You first of all think about the publishers that you love because you love playing their games and you think they do a really effective job with marketing. Because one of the biggest things you're going to ask a publisher to do when you sign with them is to market your game. If they're really good at it, they might sell oodles of copies. If they're really bad at it, they might not do so. So think about those publishers that you think have great games and very effective marketing. You want to find publishers that have the same target audience as your game. You want to find publishers that have the same vibes as your game. If your game's a cozy game, find other publishers that do cozy games. If it's high conflict, find other publishers that do that, puzzly, etc. So similar vibes. Think about where the publisher sells. Do they do it at your friendly local game stores? Do they do it on Kickstarter? Do they do it on Amazon or Target? Each of those 4 different places to sell games have rather different profiles of games. So think about where your game ought to be sold and which publishers specialize in that. And then finally, find publishers for which your game will not cannibalize their sales. This is where I've heard questions where people are like, well, should I find publishers that use the same mechanics? Probably not, or maybe not. That's not at least where I would start, because people oftentimes people only want so many games of a certain mechanic. So I go more for same target audience, same vibes, and appropriate sales channel. How do you research publishers? Board Game Geek is fantastic for this. You can filter by all sorts of different things and get a list of publishers. And then you can sort that list by the number of ratings so that you can get a proxy for how many games have been sold. So you can find those publishers that are potentially more successful at getting the word out for those games. The Cardboard Edison Publisher Compendium, I think, is well worth the Patreon support, or I think you can buy it outright. But it has a list of a bunch of publishers, how to contact them, and whether or not they are taking pitches right now. You can also just go to publisher websites. They oftentimes have a page, not always, but oftentimes have a page that talks about game submissions, whether they're accepting them and how to submit them, and what they're looking for. You can also just look at your own game shelves. You can look at your local game store shelves and see if there are games on there that seem like similar vibes as your game. Pam Walls has a newsletter. If you don't watch Pam Walls' videos, you should. She does great content about what it's like to be a game designer, and with great tips along the way. Her newsletter has a whole bunch of a good list of publishers that she's updating that are accepting pitches and what they're looking for. And then finally, ask your playtesters. If you're not sure, just ask your playtesters which publishers they think would be a good fit for that game, especially if it's in its more mature later stages. All right, you have gotten your list of publishers. What do you do next? You're going to attack in waves. You're going to identify the top 5 publishers, and you're going to contact them. Then you're going to wait a bit. 1 to 2 months, see if you get responses, see if people are interested, see if you get a rejection, that sort of thing. And then you're going to, at that point, identify the next 5 and contact them. Publishers anticipate and expect that you are going to be contacting other publishers, that it's not totally exclusive. That might have been the case in the past, but for the vast majority of publishers anyway now, they fully expect you're going to continue to pitch to other publishers until you have both signed on the dotted line. And then you want to make sure you follow each publisher's process. Some of them want to receive emails. Some of them want you to fill out their web form. Some of them want you to send rules or a video. Some of them don't. So just follow their process. And one thing I've done is, if I was not sure, I've contacted the general customer support email address at publishers and just asked, "Are you accepting pitches? And if so, how?" And I've done that when there's nothing on their website stating one way or the other. And oftentimes they are actually accepting pitches. They just haven't mentioned it anywhere. All right. And then I'm sorry to say, at that point, you need to prepare for disappointment. The vast majority of publishers are not even going to respond to you. I don't know about vast majority, but probably the majority. A lot of publishers just don't respond. Or they will respond, and it might be months later. So prepare to wait a long time. And then when you do get a response, more likely than not, it's a rejection. This is a numbers game. You're going to need to contact a lot of publishers in order to get your game signed. Most likely. You might get really next, try to layer on video. How do I still sound? Okay, next, let's try to layer on screen sharing. I'm gonna knock. Yeah, that's fine. That should be fine. All right. Are we good? I am no longer a robot. All right, great. Yeah, so I think I ended with me saying that I mentally prepare for rejection. I assume that I'm going to either get no response or get rejected. And then if anything more positive happens, I'm wildly surprised and thrilled. All right, so that said, as I said, this is a numbers game. Publishers are getting hundreds or thousands of pitches every year, and each one only signs a fraction of those. And so part of what you need to do is reframe the pitch, each pitch that you're doing, as an opportunity to practice, not just for this game, but for all of the games you make in the future. You will get better at pitching the more you do it, more comfortable with it the more you do it. You're also, in having done the pitch, even if they turn down your game, you are making a personal connection with somebody in the industry that might provide benefits for you down the line. And also, more pragmatically, you are on that publisher's designer mailing list. Not all of them keep a designer mailing list, but those that do will send you emails and say, "We're looking for this type of game. Do you have anything?" Or they'll say, "We are going to do our designer days coming up. You should submit games to it." So if you pitch, you'll get on those mailing lists, and that's great. And then beyond that, I got to say, just make games because you love doing it. It's easy to get wrapped up in, do I have this? Can I get this one signed and that sort of thing? But I will say, from personal experience, getting signed is certainly not a cure-all for imposter syndrome. And nor is it a guarantee for success. There are plenty of horror stories for people who have gotten their game signed and then it wallowed for a few years before the publisher then went out of business or turned it back to them. So, make games because you love it is my story there. All right. So at that point, let's say you've done a bunch of pitches and you need to ask yourself, am I going to keep doing more? You've done several waves of pitches to publishers. So the questions I kind of go through in my own head are, first of all, just objectively thinking about this game. Is it a bankable product? Going back to our definition earlier. How strong are the hooks for this game? And have there been any patterns to the feedback I've gotten from publishers? If they're all saying something similar, it's probably true, at least from the perception that the game is suggesting based on your sell sheet and video. So let's look at some real examples from me. Every game is different. So let's start with Medieval Hustle. This was a game really the first game that I took seriously with my game design. I pitched it 10 times, and I was thrilled to get 2 publisher playtests. But ultimately, I ended up shelving the game and not pitching it further. And the reasons for that is The game honestly did not have much of a strong hook. It was just some basic cards and nothing too special, I would say. And it was also not simple enough for a family game, not interesting enough for a hobby game, or didn't have enough depth for a hobby game. So I decided I'm going to move on and make other games. Maybe I'll come back to it someday. Cumulus was similar. I pitched it to 8 publishers, and 2 of them playtested it. But the feedback was pretty consistent from those 2 publishers, and I ended up shelving it. And it was, in this case, it was too expensive for a family game, and it was too chaotic for a hobby game. And I would need to gut that game to make either of those things not true. So I moved on. And now Positano. So I pitched this to 39 different publishers. And the reason I kept going after, much farther than any of the other games is that I had conviction in terms of the strength of the hooks in this game. And that the gameplay of it is both simple and compelling. So 3 different publishers playtested it, and one of them signed it. So every game is different. Some of them you might need to pitch to more than 39 publishers before you find the right one. But assess again the strength of your hooks and is there a home for this? All right, so there are some other great ways to get in front of publishers. First of all, contests. I love contests. I think they're great. Cardboard Edison and Ion Awards in particular, not only do most publishers, but a lot of publishers, they're aware of them. They, being able to say that you did well in those will help get attention on your game. But also, there's oftentimes publishers involved as judges for both of those contests. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that some of them might approach you after the contest. Secondly, then, designer days. I've participated with Pegasus a couple times, where they're inviting designers all over the world to get on a Zoom meeting with them for 10 minutes and pitch a game, one or more. So again, get on their mailing list, see if you can join these in the future. And then online speed pitches, Unpub's speed pitches are phenomenal. It's how they were the road to me getting a couple of these games signed, and starting getting some professional relationships with some of these publishers. These speed pitches though used to be a lot less competitive, and they've gotten a lot more competitive. So for all of these things, all the advice I've been giving about pitching with the hook first design and that sort of thing, all of that advice applies to all of these things as well. Everything you're doing to make your game more pitchable to publishers will help you do better in contests, and will help you first land a slot in online speed pitching, and then secondly, be able to do that effectively once you get it. All right, so let's say everything actually, the universe came together and the publisher wants to meet with you. A few things. First of all, find out some basics. What is the length of the meeting? Do they want to do a playtest or just talk about the game? And then how are you going to meet, with Zoom or Discord or something else? I've always been a little bit surprised that when they reach out, these things are not clear. So make sure that they are clear when you reach back out to them. Secondly, lower pressure on yourself. If you've not met with a lot of publishers, once you start doing so, you're going to find that they're almost universally very friendly, supportive people. They're gamers like yourself. They got into this industry because they love games, and they generally will be supportive of you as a designer, whether or not they decide to sign your game. So they're not scary people. And then also lower pressure on yourself, because odds are, based on the numbers, they're not going to sign your game. So do your best, enjoy it, make a personal connection, and just lower that pressure. Don't go in with too much anxiety. And then, to help you further, prep and practice. I am a big favor of practicing, a big proponent of practicing repeatedly and out loud. You're going to want to get very comfortable with the words that you're going to have to say to that publisher, so that you can do it in a concise manner, and you can do it in a professional manner. Then, if you are playtesting, make sure your teach is very concise. it's likely you're not going to be playing the full game unless your game is very small. And so you're going to want to shrink down your teeth to just the essentials. Try it out in a playtest or two with Break My Game. And then finally, you can stack the game in favor of the publisher winning and in favor of the publisher having as much fun as possible. So, give them those really fun cards. Put that at the top of the deck so that they get it. All right. So, following up, there were lots of questions when I asked for questions about what questions you all might have for me to spend some time on. Following up was a hot topic. So I'll say for myself, I don't usually bother following up for publishers that don't respond at all. But I don't know, maybe I should. But I typically don't follow up for non-responding publishers. If a publisher has playtested the game or in some way expressed interest, and then they've gone dark, which happens a surprising amount, I will tend to send an email once a month for up to 3 months. I think Matthew Hocker gave me some of this advice somewhere earlier on, and I've been employing this technique. So monthly emails once a month. You're going to personalize each of those emails to the publisher. Not a form email. You're going to remind them why they're interested in the game. They're busy people. They're probably overwhelmed. That's why they haven't gotten back to you. So jog their memory and remind them why they're so keen on this game. And then in the final email, politely say that if you don't hear from them again, you'll just assume that they're no longer interested. Sometimes that last email is the one that's going to jar them into finally responding. And thank you for that technique, Matthew. All right, then, again, the stars have aligned even further, and you get an offer. I like to review contracts against the checklist from Meeple Syrup, which now is even more extensive through the Tabletop Game Designers Association. So if I have found contracts generally understandable, the legal ease is not too dense, and they are not that long. But having a checklist can help to make sure that having that checklist can help make sure that it's not missing anything. I want to say, and I'm seeing these questions, I want to say the checklist is somewhere in resources, but if it's not, I can post it after this. And then you can negotiate terms. Actually, before negotiation, I'll say first, you can ask questions back to the publisher. I found that they are all happy to answer questions that you might have. And then secondly, you can negotiate terms. And the way I recommend doing this, pick the 1 or 2 issues that you feel are most important. Maybe it's the royalty percentage. Maybe it's some kind of creative control. Maybe it's the timeline. Whatever it might be, pick the 1 or 2 things that are most important to you and make a request. The worst thing that can happen is they say no. But oftentimes I found they're actually pretty amenable and I don't know if they're expecting these kinds of requests, but they seem pretty amenable to it. But at the same time, I will say, negotiation means extra time in the contracting process. And as I heard a salesperson that I worked with once say, time kills deals. So if you are negotiating, there is a chance that it's going to get extended and something is going to happen that causes that deal to slip through your fingers. So just keep that in mind. Negotiation can be worth it, but just don't belabor the process. All right, that concludes my formal content. I'm going to tackle a couple of these questions that did not fit elsewhere, and you all can post any additional questions that you have for me. I hope this was useful. Eric asked, how to receive a publisher idea during a pitch meeting. For example, if during a pitch meeting, a publisher makes some suggestions about changes in theme or mechanics, how do you navigate those conversations? And especially interested in how you navigate that if you disagree with their take. I've not yet had a publisher suggest something that I strongly disagreed with before it was signed. Sometimes after, but not before. Before it's signed, if it's generally, I find that publishers have good ideas. They are coming to the table with a different skill set than I have. That's why I want to work with publishers rather than self-publish. And generally, they're going to make it a more bankable product, something that is going to do better. And so generally, I like their ideas. If they were to come up with something that I strongly disagreed with, I think I would just be myself and be honest and say why I don't think that would work, or what are the considerations they should be thinking about. Part of that is, again, the publisher wants to see if you are somebody they want to work with. That doesn't mean somebody that has no opinions. You can certainly have opinions, but can you respond to their feedback in a way that clearly listens to them, considers what they're saying, and then responds in a reasonable way. Then James asks, how do you navigate multiple publishers interested at once and getting an offer while another publisher is still testing? I've had this happen, I think, twice now, and it sounds like a great experience, but I found the whole experience really stressful. So I don't know. Basically, what I can say is publishers know that you've been pitching to other publishers. They think they don't have an issue with that. And I've been able to say, I would like to give this other publisher some extra time to get back to me with an answer, maybe because that publisher has been working with you longer, or started playtesting earlier. Make sure that is a fixed amount of time, though. Chat with that other publisher first. Say that you've gotten an offer, and ask them if they can wrap up playtesting and give you a decision within the next, say, 2 weeks, or ask them if that's reasonable. That's how I would approach it. But I'd also say, if you have an offer in your hand and you're happy with the publisher that gave you an offer, you might just want to sign it and get it done. Because again, time kills deals. All right. We have some questions. Okay. Have I had a publisher change the theme of my game? No, not yet. I've heard they do that rather often. What I've found so far, for me at least, I've been kind of shocked at how intact not just my theme, but the design and mechanics are with the final product. So that's partly why I said make sure you have strong graphic design, because from what I've found, whatever the graphic design that you use might end up being what's in the final product. Next question. What happens when a publisher asks to playtest the game? We're sending a prototype. Great question. Sorry, I didn't mention this. Some publishers will playtest on ScreenTop or using another virtual prototyping platform. That's great. I love it when that happens, because that means I don't need to create another physical prototype and ship that off. If they do, so if you have a simple game, just cards, some publishers will offer to do print and play. If it is a more complex game, you're probably going to be making another physical prototype and shipping it off to them. Typically, you pay the shipping on the way there. The publisher, generally, they will ship it back to you at some point. That might be some months later. This is partly why I advocate pitching to publishers in waves, so that if a publisher responds positively, you have a chance to get it to them. And you don't want 7 publishers to all say they're interested and then need to make 7 physical prototypes, or maybe you do, but I guess it depends on the game. Do I recommend working on multiple games in parallel? Do I pitch multiple games to the same publisher, not necessarily at the same time? Working on multiple games in parallel, I'm happiest when I have a game that I am that is I'm iterating quickly, and I have a good idea of where I want it to go, and I'm really excited about it. That happens occasionally, but oftentimes I get stuck with a game, and then I need to work on a different game to get unstuck. So that's why I end up working on multiple games in parallel. In terms of pitching multiple games to the same publisher, my current approach is I'm going to keep pitching to new publishers rather than the ones I'm already working with until those games are in the market and do well. Part of that is because I want to meet lots of publishers and get my name out there and that sort of thing. I think that'll help with opportunities down the road. Part of that is because this is part of it is I don't know how well these games are going to do with each of these publishers. I don't know how effective the publishers are going to be. I don't know if they'll still be in business, all of that. And so I don't want to hitch my wagon to a single publisher to too high of degree at this point. Do I pitch to publishers with a current pitch if they didn't respond to a previous pitch? What are your criteria for no longer pitching to a publisher? Yeah, I don't take a non-response personally. I think it's not probably a good process, but I guess if that publisher is successful with getting games on the market, I assume that they have better processes elsewhere in their business than their responses or non-responses to designers. So yes, I will continue to do that. My criteria for no longer pitching to a publisher, I can only think of a couple, but like when I met with them, it's actually when it's publishers that have met with either online or at a convention, and they just rubbed me the wrong way, and I didn't think they were somebody I wanted to work with. That's my criteria at this point. But most publishers I would be willing to work with again, certainly. Is it important to know or consider business considerations like component count before pitching a game? If you pitch a game that seems promising, but economically it wouldn't make sense in its current form, is that likely to be a deal breaker? If it's for the family market, my experience has taught me that those games need to be cheap generally. For the hobby gamer or strategy gamer market, people are willing to spend a lot more money. So I think if you have a game for the family market, those are typically going to be like $25 to $30 and under, ideally more like $20. In the strategy game market, those can get rather pricey. I would say if your game is awesome and your hooks are strong, I think publishers will figure out a way to make it work. But don't have extraneous components in there. And then, Dean, you would like to hear a bit about playtests with publishers and whether I've been asked to polish it up a bit more for another playtest. Obviously, changing things to incorporate their ideas means the game can become unstable in other ways. Yeah, I had one publisher that I have signed the game now, but they playtested the game for about a year before I signed it. And they were mainly playtesting it. They were exclusively playtesting it with their own groups. And they liked it, and they kept saying positive things, but they kept wanting me to tweak this here or change this there. And while I was not thrilled to wait a year, I was thrilled with the feedback the thoughtful feedback they were providing. Not all publishers do that. They clearly got the game. They understood what I was trying to do, and they understood what would make it better. If they were suggesting things that didn't make a lot of sense to me, and they weren't receptive to my feedback back, I might just move on and try to find a different publisher. All right. If the theme has a strong hook, that's not a question. Great. How's the process for meeting publishers in person? So I've done it at Gen Con and Proto Spiels. That's been my that's been my experience. And with Gen Con, a lot of publishers were posting that they or sending out emails saying they're going to be at Gen Con and they're interested in taking pitch meetings from designers. I reached out to them. They set up a meeting without too much. I don't think they were doing it too selectively, I'll say, compared to like contests and pitching online and that sort of thing. And then you typically have a half an hour block with them, sometimes less. You should get your game, be ready to get your game out, show them how it's played, focus on the hooks. And to be able to do that in a really quick amount of time. If it's a short game, you might want to try to play it with them directly. If it's like a party game or something like that, or a little card game. If it's a bigger game, you're just focusing on what the hooks are. Bring your sell sheet. They will expect that. And with that in-person meeting, what you're mainly trying to do is to get them to say that they're interested in the game and they'll want to play test it. Most commonly, they're going to say, "Well, we're looking at a lot of games here, and we'll be in touch." And that may or may not be positive. That's just their process. All right, I'm looking for more questions. Prime time for pitching. Okay, so I've heard people say, well, you don't want to pitch to publishers when you're in convention season because they're just overwhelmed. And I think that is true, especially probably for small publishers. But larger publishers, and when I say convention season, what we're really talking about is summer and fall. But larger publishers have people who are their sole job is to take pitches from designers. So they're going to want to be taking pitches during that time. So I haven't tried to I haven't limited myself for when I'm pitching. I will pitch whenever it seems whenever I feel like I have a game that's ready to do so. All right, Jay, how often do you ask publishers to return a prototype if they are not further interested? Any tips on how to do this? I've only had to do this once. All other ones have sent it back to me without me needing to ask. I had to do it once, and come to think of it, I don't think they ever sent it back. So I can't offer you tips on how to do that, other than to say that you'd like your prototype back, please. Let's see here. If you have pitched to a publisher and they have passed on a game, is it worth reaching out to them again if the game has changed significantly at a later date? So first I'll say, if they pass on a game and you have a different game, it's absolutely worth reaching out to them again. If you have the same game, I mean, if they pay, I guess a lot of the rejections I've received didn't seem to be leaving the door open for wanting to see it again. In that case, I probably would not go back to that publisher. If the email left the door open, or the response back, the rejection left the door open, I absolutely would. In that case, they'll be saying, I look forward to seeing something of this in the future, or if you can figure out this problem, I'd like to see it in the future. By all means, reach back out. But if that door is not open, I don't know that I would do that again. All right. Are there any recommended tools I like to use for pitching online or preparing pitches online? I mean, I use Google Slides. I will oftentimes make a presentation and then I'll have Screen Top ready to jump into that. And when I say Screen Top ready, it is fully ready. All the stuff's dealt out. We are ready to go. I think that's about it. Yeah, it's Google Slides and that, and then Discord is oftentimes the place to meet. Let's see here. Are there any other questions? Oh, Protospiels. I didn't mention that. Thanks, Randy. Yes, I've met with publishers at Protospiels. That's not really what Protospiels are about. And this is the in-person Protospiels, not the online one. Oh, that'd be interesting. Protospiels are not about meeting with publishers, but they happen to be there. And they will play your game. They'll give you feedback on your game. And if they really like it, they might want to talk to you further about the game. And yeah, Grant's question, publishers go to Protospiels. Not a lot of them, but there's usually a few at each one. Are there more questions in here? Do I make my Screen Top prototype public so that they can just jump on? I make my Screen Top prototype public when they are going to be playtesting it themselves. So I want it so that they can just go to that and create a game whenever they want. If they want to create more than one, if they want to do more than one playtest without me being involved. Other than that, I don't typically make it public, but I don't see any reason why not. You certainly could. All right. I think that covered all the questions, but I do see lots of people typing. I hope this was useful to all of you. There's this one. Oh, reposting my question. jumping back to that, it's Cameron. Sorry, mentioned before about picking publishers where your game might fit into their lineup but doesn't cannibalize. What if they have a game that's similar to yours but is less complicated or involved? Would you pitch saying that their game would be a good gateway to the one you're pitching, or is it best to stay away from publishers that have similar game products? Well, publishers publishers want lines of products. That's certainly easier for them. So think about all the Tickets to Ride and Catans and Monopolies and that sort of thing. So if you think your game is a good game that could be in a line of products, you could pitch it that way. Um, if it's similar to one of their other games but just easier, but you're not pitching it as a line in their product, I don't know that I would do it that way. That feels like it might be cannibalizing. But yeah, I mean, like as an example, a great example of what I'm describing here is Finspan. Finspan is the easier, less complicated version of Wingspan, and it's a product in the line. So people who have bought Wingspan may just buy Finspan 2 to play it with people who might find Wingspan 2 complex. So if it's that kind of situation, I think that could work.
Jeff, thank you so much for answering these questions. I have a feeling this amazing community is going to have questions for you all night because it's such a interesting and fascinating topic. But I just want to know that you are relieved of your amazing duty tonight, and thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insight and wisdom with us.
Thank you, all of you. It's been an amazing community, and you've helped me get to where I am. So I wanted to give back to some of you. Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone. Thank you. All right.